Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Season 4, Episodes 1 and 2. So, going into this season, we of course have the aftermath of what had happened at the end of Season 3. So, we're basically left here with trying to figure out who had died by the end of the last episode of Season 3. And so, really, here we're going on to try and just realized then season 3, the end of season 3, was to just give us a lot of episode going on into season 4, because now we have to really take our time to just go through and just oh well, this one's dead, oh this one's okay, oh this one's this, oh this one's that, oh okay, and deciphering every aftermath bit of what had happened from the end of last season. So going into this, we basically are to go on and kill one threat, but when we are to go on and kill one threat, really never really if they go on and kill every single villain and every single there's eventually just gonna be another one popping up. It's kind of pointless at this point when you are to just kill somebody on the show, because there's somebody swooping right in and just oh, okay, well, I will be that replacement villain for the season. Their problems never go away, and so it's just kind of we kind of go on and have this consistently to be this stalemated thing, but I don't know, it's pretty interesting. We also get a flashback thing from, of course, the early stages of the Duttons getting this land and talking it over once the Native Americans. And so we end up having, of course, have a just kind of interesting flashback here, but we also have to have a bunch of aftermathy things. So with that said, I think that's all that I want to say about these first two episodes, because there's not much to really just say here, because if I say so and so character has a really interesting story here, then immediately there's a lot of stuff where it's oh, that person's still alive technically. Oh, okay, well, forcefully, yeah, that person has to still be alive. So it's really difficult for me to want to go into teeing up any part of this show, just because then it would be revealed of who is alive still. So with that said, I think I'm forced to go into spoilers, just because I can't I can't really say what's going on in the story from the aftermath of the end of season 3 without saying oh, okay, well, this person is now dealing with this, and so it basically turns into spoilers. So I can say that this is a very interesting opening to season 4. I could probably much rather like the opening of season 3 better, but because it just kind of feels like we're putting up a lot of story just to waste a lot of time, is honestly how I feel about this fourth season so far. So with that said, let's go into that double 5 time territory. Let's just go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time you get to spoil this episode, or these episodes, I should say. So the aftermath, aftermath of the end of episode 10 of season 3. So John Dutton, of course, is to be left on the side of the road, just going and leaving a note about the van that he, of course, was to have seen that attacked him. And so all of a sudden we surprisingly have Rip, who is to find John in the middle of the road, grab him, pick him up, and is to take him as quickly as possible to the hospital, where we end up finding out that John is going to be like in the hospital for a while, and also so is Jimmy, who Mia is to find and is to bring him in to the, of course, hospital where he's going to rehab, and like he has to relearn how to like sit up or like sit down and get up, sit down and get up, like do these kind of like squat equivalent kind of things to get these workouts in. So we also have us, of course, needing to know the aftermath of other characters. So Monica and the field hands are also dealing with their own thing. If that didn't seem there was anything going on with them in this episode, Jamie is to be like not dealing with anything whatsoever. And so like for him he's just like like I'm going throughout my life, to where when eventually we have someone come back, they immediately accuse Jamie of doing all this. And so let's talk about that person. So, but wait, let's finish the Monica. And so we eventually have Monica, who is to hang up with Casey, and all of a sudden there's intruders coming into this ranch trying to kill people off. And so we end up having Tate, who ends up going and shooting this one guy. So we have Casey telling Monica to go to the bunkhouse, and so eventually Monica and Tate are running to the bunkhouse, and so Lloyd is having his gun and having to shoot numerous people, and Monica's like, "What's going on?" And Lloyd's like, "I don't even know. Like, let's just go and let's try to like defend ourselves because we don't know what's really going on here." So so let's go and bring it up like certain people. So Casey, we end up finding out, is to shoot his way through uh, his office, and eventually he goes to rush and go after these mercenaries. And so he has, of course, Sheriff Donnie going with him with a bunch of livestock officers to go and hunt these guys down, because he is to find the van that Rip is to call him and tell him about. And so Casey is being really reckless because Sheriff Don is to tell him, it's like, well, hey, there's too many civilians here. Like, don't take the fight to this guy here. And so, but Casey ends up ramming into this van and then goes on and is to have this shootout where it seems like there's civilians in the way of this. And so it kind of all comes down to them kind of getting this car and trying to take this car down before it goes off. It gets out. Like has these people run off and kills them off also. So, but Casey also gets shot in the process of things, but he's fine. Like, of course he is. So we have him kind of fall over and pass out, but he's like perfectly fine. We see him later, kind of in the bushes, kind of with this kind of fake military kind of like disguise on, and he's just kind of hiding in the bushes, just kind of waiting for something else to happen here. So John Dunn makes it to the hospital and is to eventually want to leave the hospital, and so eventually he has an ambulance drivers forcibly bring him back into his house, where they then have to bring him up these flight of stairs on this gurney. And so they're trying to get him up there, and John's like, man, it would be a lot more dangerous if I were to have gone on and walked up these flight of stairs than have you guys carry me with this gurney. It's like really dangerous. So they go on and they do it, and so we have John in the house, who is to get this nurse that's watching over him. And whenever John is to do whatever he wants, which is basically just get right back on the horse, this nurse is to tell him, it's like, no, like, you shouldn't be doing that. And John is telling this nurse, lady, like, Maggie, you're fired. Like, no, like, I'm going to do whatever I want. Even if it means that I'm going to die, I don't care. So, let's go on and let's talk about Beth. So, did she die in that explosion? Of course not. So, Beth is going on and is making her way out of her Schwarzenmeyer office that is exploded. And so now we end up finding Beth like all like disheveled, like her clothes are obviously like heavily burnt, as well as her skin is heavily burnt. And Beth hears absolutely nothing. There is to be one guy who is to ask her, it's like, hey, are you okay? And Beth can't hear a single thing that he's saying, but she's like, hey, give me one of, you have a cigarette, give me one of those. The weirdest thing after you've just been through an explosion is to smoke a cigarette. Man, is that weird. And so this police officer is to, of course, ask Beth like some questions or whatever, and she can't hear him at all. So we, I guess, have Beth eventually treated for her burns, and when she ends up going to this hospital, she eventually goes on to find some kid there named Carter, who unfortunately is at the hospital with his father, that I guess is to be his last family, and he is to be told that his father is going to die soon. And so Beth is to go on and sit next to this kid and share a cigarette, even though he's like 13. And Beth's like, oh my god, I shouldn't have had you like smoke this cigarette, you're only 13. She's like, I thought you were like 17. So we end up having Beth going on and talking to this kid, and it seems like this kid is gonna go on and either run away or some kind of something. It seems like he's gonna end up getting himself into trouble, and so Beth is to go on realizing that there's nowhere for this kid really to go. She ends up basically quickly like adopting him basically by like having this kid just come into this place and not exactly have like the paperwork adoption kind of thing. Beth is to just have this kid come in there, and Beth is to tell Rip, hey, like, I found a kid today kind of thing. And Rip is like, huh? Like, no. Like, I'm not, no. Like, I'm not going to, like, I'm not going to do this. No. Like, to where Rip eventually goes on and, like, leaves his kid on the side of the road. But then all of a sudden, Rip is to realize, like, God, like, I can't do this. And so he ends up going and taking the kid and bring him back home and says, like, okay, fine. Like, but if you're going to live here, you're going to go and do some work. He's going to go and clean the horse stalls. And that's going to be his job, is like cleaning up crap and whatever. So we go on, and so now who else should we cover here? We eventually have the flashback. What was the flashback? So we of course have James Dutton, who of course is John Dutton Sr.'s father, that is to give us a flashback about James Dutton going to this one Native American called Red Bear, and telling him, it's like, well, hey, like, guys, like, you guys don't own this land anymore. And so they're kind of bargaining over things, to just say, like, hey, do you guys need any food? Like, we can go and give you guys like a one thing of cattle, and like to just kind of help you guys like try to transition here to eventually go off this land. But like, so we eventually have kind of Red Bear and James kind of like bargaining and talking about things, and so really that's all that actually happens there. There's no like sequence where anybody has to kill anyone, or there's nobody trying to like haggle over. It's just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we don't live here anymore. That's okay. Like I'll just go and like, but like James goes out of his way to try and help these people, like basically by giving them a thing of cattle, just like, hey, this is all yours. And but after that, it's like sayonara, get out of my land. And we end up having the kids who kind of apologize for what it all like happened here, and they're like, well, hey, like it's not your guys' fault. So we go on, and so eventually what happens is we of course have we of course have because I'm trying to figure out all of if I've covered technically everything in this first pilot episode. um yeah, I feel like oh no, wait, we also have Rip, who is to go on and find Rourke, who is again fishing in some water somewhere or some stream somewhere. And so Rip is having this cooler, and before he goes out to do this, we have Beth asking Rip, it's like, well, hey, like, you're going somewhere? And Rip's like, yeah, and I can't tell you where I'm going. And Beth's like, okay. So Rip goes off with a cooler with a rattlesnake in it to go after Rourke and have the snake bite Rourke and kill him off. And so where we end up having, of course, Rourke being killed, we just have another person just coming in. We have, of course, this woman called Caroline Warner coming in to just replace Rourke, and like she's basically the new Rourke for this show. And I'm like, okay, this like, what was the point of even killing off Rourke? It was kind of a pointless thing. Um, just to have you have this new like oblivious person technically that is to have to like get up to speed about things. So we end up having Jamie, who is to eventually go on with his father Garrett to go and buy some land for himself. And Garrett is kind of already making plans about how they can go on to start a farm here, and that they can go on instead of having horses and kind of maintain things with horses. They can at first have like Ducatis or Doom buggies or whatever, like vehicles that like they can kind of gas up and go on to uh, eventually just kind of watch over their cattle. And so it should be simple enough considering they're kind of doing a very small operation here. So we end up having this seller who is to immediately think that, like, oh, is Yellowstone buying this up? And Jamie's like, no, this is just for me. Because we have Jamie, who is to, of course, want to separate himself from this family. And it seems that more and more he's just going to be able to just, like, hey, man, like, I got my own thing. And completely be separate from this family as if, like, they don't really no longer exist anymore to him, and because that's basically what's really going on here. And so Beth is to go on and confront Jamie because she thinks that Jamie was the culprit to have gone on and hired these mercenaries. And so now Beth is like, I know you did this, I know you. And like Jamie's like, why? Like, like, because Jamie has already separated himself from this family. Like, what does it matter anymore? And because we have Garrett, who had that whole suspicious thing about like killing off an empire and so on and so forth, and I'm like like I couldn't exactly think that this is like Rainwater going and doing this, because really there's a lot of time where Rainwater technically does need John. Like, if anything, there might be more suspicion for Blue Thunder to go on and want to go and kill all these people off, much more so than like Rainwater does, because it seems that Rainwater does technically need the Dutton family for consistent things here. And but I don't know, like I don't also feel that the market equity people, like I like they would probably obviously have to be the culprit here, but like I don't know, like something just feels like we're like there's something kind of like unresolved somewhere. But because we have it where conveniently like Rourke was talking to Willa, and they were saying like, hey, we should do this deal like we did at the one spot before. And so it could be Jamie, it could be the market equity people. It'll be interesting to see how eventually more of this season plays out. But anyways, so finishing up this second episode. So we of course end up having Jimmy make it back to the ranch, and so it seems that John is wanting to talk to Travis about like spending like millions of dollars to go and get big fat checks. So it seems like John is trying to like blow a lot of money they don't have, to go on and try to get into the rodeo circuit, to try to get into some kind of sponsorship deal, and trying to get their name out there. And so John is just like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this now. And so Travis is like, well, hey, if you want to do it right, like I'm going to go and like say that it's going to be a couple $1,000,000, but then you're going to get big fat checks after that. Um, like big fat checks the size of phone books. And so like meaning there's gonna be like thick checks coming his way once they go on and they do this. So we have John, who is to consistently go and ride his horse, which he shouldn't because he could possibly die while doing it. Is to at one point get on his horse before Carter is to make it into the horse stalls, and he's like, "Oh my god, I should have been the first one to this stall, and I'm not because you're here." And John's like, "It's fine, kid. Like I don't even count as a worker here, so don't worry about it." So John goes off to go and make his way to this pond of sorts, or this water of sorts, and so Casey is to follow him there. And so now they're kind of talking about like what their next step is to go after these mercenary people, because it seems like there's quite a few mercenary like guys that had gone on to wipe these guys out. There seems to be a certain number of them left. So John is like, yeah, we're gonna go and wipe out all of them. Like, Casey, do whatever you do whatever you need to do to go and find a way for you to go on and finish all these people off. Like, we don't want anybody coming back on us, so figure out a way to kill all these characters off. Like, we want them completely wiped out. So we so, I'm trying to think here if there's anything left to go on and talk about here. No, I don't think so. Like I don't feel like there's anything left. Man, that is way quicker than I thought it was going to be. Um, and more than likely, I'd have a normal like list of cast members and whatever to just kind of like poke through or thumb through or whatever. But I think I feel like I've gotten through a bulk of what I was to say here fairly quickly. Um, Jimmy is to make his way back to the ranch and eventually find out that he is going to be attached to Travis and his people because Jimmy is going to have to learn from them, and because they know like their best bet is to take Jimmy along with them, because if he's not going to be able to learn how to be a decent rodeo guy from that, then like he'll never learn. So, and really, it wasn't like it wasn't Rip's choice. It was, uh, of course, John's choice to just send this guy out there. So we, like, I'm also kind of getting concerned about the field hands. Like, how are they going to be able to later down the road like afford all these field hands when like they're spending millions of dollars? Like, you would think that eventually this ranch would just go like belly up and have to just start losing people and firing people, and they would have to probably go with like uh the thinnest like ranch that they can go on and try to do. And plus also, like, if they weren't going to kill their ranch any time before, like they're cementing it now that they're just going to kill this ranch off. So with that said, I'm trying to think here if there's any last thing. Let me pause here for 1 second. Yeah, the only thing that I think I've left to talk about, because I just remembered it now, is Jimmy and John were talking, and eventually we had John who's asking Jimmy like, "Well, hey, like, how do you feel?" And so Jimmy's to mention it's like, "Well, hey, I can't feel my fingertips, but supposedly like for some reason they still hurt." And John is saying it's like, "Well, that's the whole thing. Like, that's like a phantom pain." Because there's to of course been a guy who was to have lost his leg, and he could still like feel it and he could still have pain from that because like it's a phantom thing. So we also had Beth who is to confront Bob about getting fired, and Beth, of course, is very upset with Bob because she's like, "Man, I made you so much money. Like, I made you tons and tons of money. And, like, now we are where we are, where, like, I'm out of a job and you're still here." Just, and, like, there's nothing for Bob to do. It's just like, well, oh well, like, it's not my fault that these people came in, bought our company out, and then fired you. Like, there's nothing that he could have done. But we just have Beth just kind of like, I'm wondering like what she's gonna do to probably get back at Bob, because that's always like, Beth is a very vengeful person, and so immediately I'm thinking like, how is Beth gonna get like after everybody? Because that she's a very vengeful person. But yeah, but I think other than that, I think they're like, that's all that I have for this one. I think that's all that I got as far, because I also like, I watched this the night before and then I slept on it and then I came on here and I decided to review this now. So not exactly the freshest way about going into it, but like I think there is a lot of just kind of quick events, and like these episodes just don't have like filled to the brim uh, of as much stuff going on as it was, but like we really do have some interesting things going on here, and like I like that it kind of feels like this show has technically slowed down in some ways, even though there's a heck of a lot of stuff going on in that first episode. Um, but still, it feels like it's kind of like okay, I can kind of like maneuver through things a lot better than I was. Um, but I'm still liking the show. I'm still enjoying the show, and like I feel that's obvious. Or otherwise, like I'd be like, I hate this. Murr. There's a lot of shows that I'll straight up tell people like, I hate this show. I don't know why I'm watching it. Probably because I have to, because it's probably some Marvel thing. And I'm like, I hate it. But it's like you have to watch it because you're like having to know silly information that is going to tie into some movie somewhere in the background somewhere. And you're like, oh, that's great that I had to watch that stupid film or that stupid show to now understand what's going on in this MCU. Um, but anyways, I am going to get out of here. I think that's all that I have. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.